Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon, and let's start this debunking video with a recipe that Marta sent me that's from 5 Minute Crafts. It's a Nutella one. Egg, flour, milk. Stirring it up. Very watery. Oh, and suddenly very thick. 15 minutes in the microwave. No, that is definitely fake. There is no way they microwaved that for 15 minutes. I can't believe that we are actually going to try this, Marta. I hope you appreciate it. Grab a nearly empty Nutella jar, crack in an egg, add some flour. They didn't add baking powder, so I'm assuming they're using self-raising flour, and top that up with some milk. Find a fork and whisk that all together. It actually doesn't work. You can't get the Nutella off the edges like this, so you do have to use a spatula to scrape all the Nutella off and then a whisk to whisk it all together. And now we're up to the bit that I am dreading, which is 15 minutes in the microwave. I'm just going to leave this filming and walk away. Let me fast forward this for you so you can see what happens. At 4 minutes, it fell over. And at 12 minutes, I could smell smoke. So I came back in to this. I should not have opened that. The smell was so pungent and so bad that I had to take the whole microwave outside, even though it was pouring with rain. Half an hour later, and it was still smouldering. And it's not just the cake that's burnt. Ugh, look at that. The plastic is burnt and melted, and that's why it smells so bad. According to the recipe, this needed 3 minutes longer than this.
Why does the house stink?
I was making a 5 Minute Crafts recipe.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm not eating that.
Let's give 5 Minute Crafts the benefit of the doubt and assume that maybe this was just a typo, and instead of writing 15 minutes, they meant to write 90 seconds. So let's make the recipe again. Nutella, egg, flour, milk, whisk it together. And now instead of cooking it in the plastic container, which may not be microwave safe, I'm going to pour it into a cup and microwave for 90 seconds.
Wow, 5 Minute Crafts, the most trustworthy of the content farms. Rubbery. It's definitely rubbery. It's a little bit like eating an eraser.
I want to see if I can develop a Nutella cake recipe for you that you can make at a mug in the microwave that might actually taste okay. I'm going to start with a decent amount of Nutella because this is contributing all the fat, sugar and cocoa in the cake recipe. Add an egg, a little bit of flour, a couple of tablespoons should do it, and a tiny bit of milk and some baking powder. I'll put this recipe on the How to Cook That website for you, so if you want to make it, you can. Whisk all that together. Now this is too much for one mug cake, so I'm going to split it between 2 cups. You can't really halve the recipe because you'd need half an egg, and it's pretty hard to halve an egg, so we'll just do 2 cups. You only want to fill your cup to halfway or it will overflow, and then microwave it just for 90 seconds, not 15 minutes, 90 seconds. That looks much better.
This is a different Nutella mud cake.
Okay, I like the cup. It's very frothy. A bit more cakey. And, Did you make it in the cup?
Yes.
It's actually good. It's a nice one. Whose recipe is this?
Mine.
Ah, of course. I like it.
The 5 Minute Crafts recipe just had way too much liquid in it for a cake. You need to get the right proportions of the different ingredients of the fat and the sugar and the liquid for a cake to turn out how you'd expect it and to be that nice texture. And unfortunately, after spending many hours scrubbing and trying all different cleaning products, I could not get that yellow tarry smoke stain out of the microwave. It was just horrible. And on top of that, whenever I try to use it, it is still pouring out that horrible, smoky, burnt plastic smell. So it must be all the way through the inside of the microwave where I can't get to. And so unfortunately, after many years of faithful service and torture doing debunking, I think this microwave is going to have to go, and I'll have to search secondhand stores for a new one. So farewell to my faithful microwave. Next, Michael sent me a question about some videos he'd seen about water glassing eggs, wanting to know if that was safe or not safe. There are so many videos on YouTube about this topic, so let's watch a little bit of a compilation of some of them so you know what it's about.
Water glassing only requires 3 things: farm fresh eggs, water, and hydrated lime.
Water glassing, an old school method used to preserve your eggs long term. And when I say long term, I'm talking about 12 months to 24 months with no refrigeration. That's right, room temperature.
This is an amazing thing. No refrigeration, no anything, just a bucket or a crock if you have it would be even better, and some hydrated lime and you're good to go on eggs.
Here we have year-old eggs. They've been sitting at room temperature, undisturbed, for about 11 months. One last step before they can be used is to give them a really good rinse. You don't want any lime ending up in your food.
As you saw in those clips, this is a really old method for preserving eggs. It dates back to before there was refrigeration. If I pull out one of my 100-year-old books, Beaton's All About Everything, it tells me in here how I can preserve my eggs using strong lime. And it goes on to give the recipe and the instructions. But if I turn back a page or two, it also tells me that for a drowning person, they should be dried, wrapped in blankets, carried to the nearest house, put in a warm bath, hot bricks or bottles put under their arms, and their nose tickled with a feather that has smelling salts applied to it. I trust that you know just how outdated that information is. If someone is drowning, you need to resuscitate them and immediately call an ambulance. And please do a first aid course so that you're prepared if you're ever in that situation. We actually have a friend who did just that. They pulled someone out of the ocean, resuscitated them, and the person survived. They're still alive today. That stranger is alive because this person bothered to do a first aid course and knew what to do. So, little promo for first aid courses there. But anyway, that hopefully lets you see how outdated the information in books can be, and that we update things over time as we learn new techniques and we learn new things that are going to be more helpful. So how does that apply to eggs? Well, one of the main risks with eggs is salmonella. Every year in the US, 142,000 people get sick from salmonella from eggs, and 30 of those people will die. Now, I don't want you to panic because a lot of people eat eggs. There are a lot of eggs, so not all eggs have salmonella. So that's not what I'm trying to say. But some do, and you can't see which ones do and which ones don't. So how do you protect yourself? Well, one of the things you need to do is refrigerate your eggs, because once you bring the temperature right down, the salmonella bacteria doesn't multiply hardly at all. So if you have a look at it when it's refrigerated versus once you bring it up to room temperature, the multiplication of that bacteria just increases almost exponentially. The other thing you can do obviously is check the use by date. Use eggs that are fresher. The longer they're stored for, the more bacteria can build up. And also cook your eggs really well. Don't eat eggs that are raw or undercooked. And if you do all those things, it's going to keep you a lot safer. Now, water glassing is keeping it obviously at room temperature for a very long time, neither of which are recommended. And it used to be thought that salmonella was only on the outside of the eggs. Like obviously the outside is in the nest and can get dirty, and so that's where the salmonella is coming from, and the inside of the egg must be sterile and clean. So therefore, by storing it in lime, it's going to keep that bacteria under control. Well, for what they knew back then, that was the best that they had, and that was a good effort to try and do that. But we know now that if a chicken is infected with salmonella, it can pass that on to the inside of the egg. So it doesn't matter if you've just got the lime on the outside, stopping anything on the outside. If it's already got salmonella on the inside of it, and then you keep it at room temperature for a year, that amount of bacteria is going to increase to such a large dose at the end of that year. We also know that chickens that are at home in sort of a homestead type environment instead of in a commercial environment are more likely to be infected with salmonella because they have a lot of immunization programs going on in the commercial ones. So for that reason, I would not recommend this method. I suggest that you would break open the eggs and freeze them. If you have to store them, give them away or sell them, but don't keep them at room temperature for a year. This method is very outdated and you'd be putting yourself at risk to do that. With thanks to today's sponsor, Dream Games. They are the creators of Royal Match, a free-to-play puzzle game with thousands of levels. I'm only up to level 169, so I feel like I'm only just at the very beginning. To play, you just have to move 3 of the same thing together to make a match, but the real key is to move more than 3 together, and then you get special things like TNT. If you're not sure what you need to do, just look up in the top corner and it tells you what you need to collect, and in the other corner it tells you how many moves you have left to do it. If you feel like you're running out of moves, try and combine 2 of the special things together and you'll see that has a lot bigger impact, which makes it much easier to finish the levels. As well as that, in between the levels there are some bonus levels where you can help save the king from his nightmares, and if that's not enough, you can also decorate the castle, you can join events, you can join a team if you want to. Some of the levels are more challenging to complete than others, but I've found most of them fairly easy to get through, and there's no adverts that pop up during the game, so it's quite relaxing just to sit and play if you've got some spare time. I'll put a link below where you can download Royal Match and see if you can get past the level that I am on. Next, Dimitar sent me this video by Blossom. So they have some matcha tea. Testing if it is real or fake. It says real matcha has the consistency of eyeshadow. Before we talk about their test, let's talk about what matcha is. This is green tea and this is matcha. This is heaps more expensive, but they're both made from green tea leaves. So what's the difference? Well, firstly, the matcha is ground much more finely. But even if I try at home to take the green tea leaves and, say, put them in a blender, or grind them in a small stone mill, or even in a mortar and pestle, I can get it finer, but it's still not as powdery as the real matcha. Manufacturers use very large stone mills with really fine grooves cut into them to grind it into that really fine powder. But even if I had one of those super expensive stone mills, I couldn't turn my green tea into matcha, and that's because there's more to it than that. One of the other differences is the matcha leaves are steamed and all of the little veins and the stems are removed before it is ground, which they don't have to do with green tea. And you may also have noticed the colour difference. So matcha is a much brighter green than the colour that you get with your green tea. And that is because for the last few weeks before harvest, the matcha green tea is shaded. And by shading it, the plants have to adapt to the low light conditions, and they do that by increasing the amount of chlorophyll in their leaves so that they can absorb the maximum amount of sunlight. And we see chlorophyll as green, so the leaves appear much brighter. And that's not the only change that occurs because they're shaded. They also don't grow as vigorously compared to the plants that are left in the full sun, which obviously makes matcha more expensive to produce. It also makes the leaves thinner, higher in caffeine and higher in amino acids, and all of that adds up to a more expensive product and one that's seen as superior to green tea. As well as that, because you are grinding it that finely, you're actually consuming the whole leaf instead of just using it like you normally do with tea and throwing the leaf away in the tea bag, so you end up with a higher concentration of all those things that are in the leaves. So people pay a lot more for matcha tea, so you can imagine why they might want to fake it. So if we go back to the test that Blossom showed, while it is true that matcha has that really fine powdery consistency and it leaves a line on the page, that doesn't actually tell us if it is matcha or not, because there are plenty of other things that also have a fine powdery consistency and leave a line down the page when you drag it down, like powdered food colouring, which you can get in all sorts of colours. So unfortunately, if you live in a country where there are a lot of adulterated and faked foods, this test by Blossom is not actually a helpful one for you to find out if you have the real deal or not. Next, I have a question sent in by Catherine about air-chilled chickens. She heard that they taste better and is a better product, so she wanted to know whether that was true or not. If you've never heard of air-chilled chickens, totally fine, let me fill you in. Once a chicken is killed, they have to be killed in order for people to eat them. They are plucked and then the carcass has to be chilled very quickly to bring it down into refrigerated temperatures so that any bacteria doesn't grow and multiply. There are laws around how quickly it has to get down on the interior of the bird down to that cold temperature. And there are a couple of ways that can be achieved. One is blasting it with cold air, and that is air chilling. The other option is to submerge the chickens into flowing icy cold water, which will cool them down very quickly, and this is called immersion chilling. And that is a very popular method because if you think about it, if you go outside on a cold day, you will get cold eventually, but if you jump into cold water, you're going to get cold very quickly. Water is very good at transferring that heat out and into the water, so therefore cooling it down fast. One of the problems with that method though is one, it uses a lot of water, and two, if you have one infected bird, that bacteria can go across through the water to all of them. So to control for that problem, most countries in the world, including Australia and New Zealand and the US, add chlorine or peracetic acid or some other disinfectant to the water to kill off any bacteria so that that's not going to be an issue. The UK does not allow that to happen. They do use immersion chilling, particularly for larger things like turkeys, but they don't allow any chlorine or disinfectants to be added to the water. But that's a whole nother story. That's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about the taste of air-chilled chicken versus water-chilled chicken or immersion-chilled chicken. Which one tastes better? Now, the issue of why would it make any difference is because the chickens that are put in the water tend to absorb some of that water into them, usually around 5% increase in their body weight from when they went into that tank to when they come out. In the US, legally, it's not allowed to be more than 8% of water. If we look at a piece of chicken, 8% water for this size piece would be this much. Or if I put it into a syringe so it's easier to see, it's quite a significant amount of water for that size piece of chicken. Let me see if I can inject it in. I don't know if I'll be able to get it to hold this much water this quickly, but we can try. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about brining chicken where manufacturers or you at home inject salty water to tenderize the meat. That's completely different. We're just talking about water that's absorbed while the chickens are in that immersion chiller. Now, in contrast, chickens that are air-chilled tend to lose some water. They dry out a bit, about 2% of their body weight is lost while they are being air-chilled. So the question is, does that water difference make a difference in how they taste? The manufacturers of air-chilled chickens will tell you, yes, it makes a difference. The taste is watered down and the chickens won't taste as good as our air-chilled chickens.
We have a better flavored chicken because we're searing in the natural juice. Our model is not about cheap chicken, it's about producing the best chicken that we possibly can.
Let's pause that one there. If you have a look at the poster on the wall, it says air-chilled good, water-chilled bad, no chlorinated water, I want flavour in my chicken. So I want to know, is that just a marketing ploy and scare tactics trying to get people not to buy immersion chilled chicken? Or is there something to it? Does it taste significantly better if you pay the higher price to get your chickens that are air-chilled? I have two brands of chicken breast here. This one is La Ionica, who on their website says that it looks, cooks and tastes better, and it is air-chilled the European way. And this one is the free ranger, who has all these different things that they are doing with their chicken, but it does not mention air chilling anywhere, and people seem to mention air chilling if that's what they're doing. After weighing, I'm just going to pat them dry and then vacuum seal them and sous vide these chicken breasts. I've added absolutely nothing to them so that we can see if there's any flavour difference. I also bought 2 whole chickens to compare. This one is air chilled and this one is water chilled. I did try and get 2 chickens that were the exact same size, but I actually could not find a bigger water chilled or a smaller air chilled one, so we're just going to have to go with this. Because of the size difference, I'll bake them until they are the same internal temperature. The smaller one obviously is going to be ready first, which is what we expect. Now, to set up a taste test, we have 3 plates, and I've labelled each one on the bottom with a number so that I know which one is which. Now, you might be wondering why we have 3 plates and only 2 chickens. And that's because to do a proper taste test, we need to have 2 that are the same and 1 that is different. And if the person can't correctly identify which one is different, then they're not significantly different from each other.
Tastes like chicken. This is a great taste test, by the way. It's not a dramatic difference. I think it's definitely this one here on my right that is different from the other 2.
All right, can you lift it up and tell me what number it is?
It is number 3.
Number 3 is the same as number 2.
Really? Okay.
Number 1 was different. Now for the sous vide chicken. These were the exact same weight and they've been cooked at the exact same temperature for the same amount of time, and they are sealed, so that means we can measure the juice that was lost during cooking. The water chilled lost 62.5 millilitres and the air chilled lost 53.5 millilitres, so about 2 teaspoons less, which makes sense because this one had more water in it to start with. Personally, I couldn't taste the difference with the roast, but with the sous vide, the texture of the water chilled is much, much more tender. So let's see if Dave notices the difference.
Over here, oh, very tender. Feels like a different texture between those 2. It's hard. They're all nice. Those 2 are very tender.
Which
so those 2 there are very tender. So I assumed this one in the middle.
Is there any difference in flavour or just texture?
If there is a difference, it's quite subtle. Maybe the one in the middle is slightly more flavoursome.
Got it correct on that one.
Yeah.
So does air chilled or water chilled taste better? It's a bit inconclusive, and that is actually consistent with what studies have found. There was one study that tested fried chicken, and they found that there was a subtle but detectable flavour advantage with the air-chilled chicken, but then a different study found that the water-chilled chickens had a slightly better texture and flavour than the air-chilled did. And yet another study said that they did not detect a significant impact on the texture or flavour attributes for the different chilling methods. It's important to note that that last study used chickens that were from the same farm. The only thing that was different was the chilling method when it got to that point of the production line. So that's something that I couldn't factor for, and you can't factor for. If you go to the shops and you buy an air-chilled and a water-chilled chicken, you're going to find that they came from separate farms. They've been probably fed different food, raised different ways, and are possibly even different ages. So it's not scientific to compare the 2 because there's so many factors in there that could affect the flavour or the texture of the chicken. But it's an interesting experiment to do. Really, in reality, it is such a subtle flavour difference, if there is one, that once you add sauces and everything else, I don't think you're going to notice the difference. So if you have enough money to choose air chilled and that's what you want to do, go for it. If you don't stress. Just buy whatever chicken you like and you can afford. You need food on your plate, Get what you can afford. Neither chilling method is going to make that big a difference. With thanks to my patrons for all of your support. You guys are wonderful. If you enjoyed this video, please do make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, all those things that let the algorithm know that you thought it was a good video. Make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you on Friday.
Look at that. I call this Nutella nightmare.